in contrast, say with 2014 or just before it, or just before 2014, there is now this global terrorist threat that comes from the Islamic State around the world, in that they encourage their followers and supporters just to go and attack so-called infidels or apostates wherever they can. What I would say about the Islamic State structure, it certainly has evolved since 10 years ago. It values itself much more as a global brand that has affiliates spread across multiple countries, and is fighting insurgencies against various governments around the world, but also as a force that can commit terrorist attacks around the world as well. 10 years ago, the governance structure and territory it controlled in Iraq and Syria was its main selling point as the central caliphate and this territorial caliphate to which Muslims around the world could migrate. But now that's not possible anymore, and really, so they call on their supporters just to go wherever their affiliates around the world, in the Sahel or in West Africa. They try to recreate the governing model that was established by the Islamic State within Iraq and Syria when it was the territorial caliphate. Really, actually, the methods of the group in terms of how they want to try to achieve success still very much actually remain the same as they were in 2014 or even before it. Whether it's in Iraq and Syria, or whether it's in West Africa, or whether it's in Mozambique and so on, that they'll eventually wear down their enemies to the point that they can trigger a rapid collapse, and then that would enable them to take territory on a larger scale. One of the models I think they see for that is how they took territory in 2014, particularly in Iraq. But of course, now also we have this issue that the Islamic State, in contrast, say with 2014 or just before it, or just before 2014, there is now this global terrorist threat that comes from the Islamic State around the world, in that they encourage their followers and supporters just to go and attack so-called infidels or apostates wherever they can. For the Islamic State, I mean, they have multiple reasons to go and attack Iran or Russia. The first being that, of course, that they have, for example, specific grievances against these countries. So Iran for having for fighting the Islamic State or helping to fight the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And then for Russia also for having helped the Syrian government, or for supporting the military governments in the Sahel to fight against the Islamic State. And then also Russia's, in regards to the Afghan context, they see Russia as one of the enablers of the Taliban government, which Islamic State sees as an apostate government that should be overthrown. So there's those specific grievances, but then also ultimately for the Islamic State, Iran is of course a Shia country, or a Shia-led Shia government. You certainly don't have what you used to have in, say, 2014 or 15, where you had thousands and thousands of people from around the world going to join Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And it was a very prominent phenomenon back then. So you don't have that anymore. But what you do have are now the Islamic State has all these affiliates around the world. That, yeah, it's certainly a more diverse composition in terms of who most of the members are. So it's not necessarily just a mainly Iraqi and Syrian organization in terms of the membership anymore of the rank and file around the world, because you have all those affiliates in Africa, for example, which are drawing primarily on local people they recruit, whether it's in northern Mozambique or whether it's in the Sahel region, or whether it's in West Africa, or whether you recruit people in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Changed at all since 2014. It's actually pretty consistent in terms of its logic and or what it wants to do, what it says it wants to do, which is ultimately that it wants its caliphate to rule the entire world. And then also they have in their mind what they see as strategic priorities. For example, they have this general principle that apostates, or people they see as having abandoned Islam or who claim affiliation with Islam, but they have beliefs or practices that make them go outside of Islam. They believe that these apostate people are worse than other disbelievers, so that they're worse than Jews and Christians and Hindus or other kinds of people who don't claim affiliation with Islam. When they talk about Gaza conflict, they say that really the first thing you have to do is you have to overthrow the so-called apostate governments that surround Israel and Palestine, and then you have to also correct the Palestinian cause and make it a properly Islamic one, and one that recognizes the nature of the war as a religious one against Jews, or that they believe that it should not be that the Palestinians should not be fighting under nationalist banners, or should not be aligning with Iran.